Welcome, my name is Barney Reese. We are going to be reading How Blessed You Are in God's Promises. I am the author. This is going to be part 6 of Your Joy. Hope you enjoy. I later went to Anderson Hospital and was told the pills being in one bottle and a narcotic, she would be considered a dealer, and unless she got some help, the officer would put her in prison for a very long time. This time I took her to Clearview, and Joanne had me use her car to go there. It was just before you got to Hattiesburg, Mississippi, and it was one of the best in the United States for rehab. In fact, Tiger Woods had gone there for sex addiction. She would be there for about a month before we could see her. I got her cigarettes, her medicine, and I told her I have good feelings about this place. It will be okay. I believe God, the creator of the universe, and Jesus was going to fix her. When we finally got to come, Kathy did not go, but me, Adam, and Joanne did come, and we were amazed when we saw how beautiful Stephanie was. For once, you could see her eyes. You could tell she was better. She still had a few weeks, but she was better, and now ready to go on with life. I had my wife back. Joanne had her Steffi back, and Adam had her cousin back. When my wife came back home, she was sober, and it was like we were kids again. I eventually had to kick my brother and his family out again, this time when they left, threatening of the law. They had robbed me yet again, but they had taken my baby's bracelet, and I told him, bring it back, or I'm going to put you and that woman you live in prison for everything you have stolen from me. I remember him bringing my daughter's bracelet back and looking at it like, really, after the incident, I could have cared less if he lived or died. All this drinking had taken its toll on Stephanie's body, and her pancreas was damaged. And I remember Pastor Clarence Tillman and Sister Tillman praying to Jesus for Stephanie's pancreas to recover. So what I must get you to understand, for Stephanie to keep drinking meant death. After Clearview, she quit drinking, and for a brief while she was on Klonopin for general anxiety disorder, blood pressure medicine, and Neurontin for pain, and some other medicines. What's roughly, she was taking about 7 pills instead of 3. She would eventually start taking her medicine, but at least she was off Xanax. Klonopin was a safer alternative. After my brother and his wife left, they stole everything they could. My dealer's sign was laying against a tree, and my cars were parked. There were metal screws found there. I still had my son and my wife in the creative universe, and Jesus was going to see through it all. For a few months we were happy. However, Stephanie had convinced me that her mama and Harold was not to blame. It was her. I had started locking her medicine up and give her the key, but for some reason she was always short, and Harold and Kathy would come visit her before I went to work. I watched her spiral yet again and did not understand why. It was like when either her sister or her mother and Harold would come, she would spiral out of control. I still would go to church when I could, and Stephanie would go too, but somehow Stephanie was drinking, and it got to the point I had enough, to the point I told her, I'm done. When Harold and Kathy came over, I sat down like children. I told them I love y'all, but y'all will be no more medicine swaps. You can come wash your clothes. Stephanie will feed you, but her medicine will never leave this house again. When she gets it, is what she gets. I will still come home from work no more, and the rest is locked up in a lockbox. So that problem was solved. Stephanie would go over to their home and come back drunk a few times, but they quit coming to mine after I said, I want you to understand, I've tried to save her. I tried to help with her addiction. I can only say I was too late for 10 years. I went into the Air Force where she tried to get me saved at Cornerstone Church. Pastor Clarence Timmons was touching people and saving people that day. And she was 18 years old. She invited me to church after that night and was on the prayer and worship team. And I watched as people fell in front row. And some gave their life to create the universe through Jesus. I crossed my arms and refused to be saved. I went into the world, and it was 10 years later, a divorce, and from a curse from the Philippines, that I found God. And about a year later, I met Stephanie. I was 10 years too late to save her. I had broken God's law. I had kept asking, why our daughter, Lord? And I'm reading about King David and Bathsheba. What did he do to Bathsheba's husband? I heard the voice in my head, and then I said, what makes you think you are more than King David? He was a man after my own heart, and he was still punished. After reading that and hearing that voice in my head, I wept, for I knew I had broken God's commandments. Thou shalt not commit adultery. And he had let me see and hold and no, my baby girl, and then he took her from breaking his laws. And he told me to tell you all, do not do what I did, follow God's commandments, or face his wrath for not doing so. For he loves us all the same. Because of this, when you break the Creator of the universe's laws, he's coming to punish you just like he did his chosen people. For the agreement says, you are to love me, but fear me. And if you love me, you will follow my 10 commandments. Maybe that is why I have to write this book. I really do not know. I can only tell you what I have gone through and what I have learned through it all. This is by studying the Bible through it all. In my mind, I know now that I had done, and all I could do was weep. See, I had read the Bible many times and knew what had did was wrong. And I adjusted my wrongdoing by drinking, by thinking she was getting a divorce, therefore it was okay to have sexual relations with her. I loved my future wife for a very long time. When I was younger, I'd met her when I was only 17 years old, and she was 13. She had brown hair and brown eyes with a slight red tint at the time. I was very attracted to her, but I really did not know why. My friend introduced me to Stephanie Woodham. He had a very deep voice. She had a very deep voice, almost like a man. She always wore red lipstick, and she later became the prom queen, most witty, most popular girl. Her mom was a nurse. She smoked then, too, and drank some beer. She always played baseball and was quite good. She also wore dress slacks and even went to college. I could see her when I could, but I never went to any of her baseball games, and she was always dating someone. It just was not me. I would sometimes see her out, and I would always say hi, but the time when she was younger, we had become really good friends, and I was always cared for her deeply. I had been taking karate from David Carr since I was 17, so I was in my 20s before I saw Stephanie again. And sometimes I would see her and just hope maybe it would be me and her together instead of the jerk she was with. I always valued her friendship, and I was always dating someone else. Her name was Liliana Sacramento, and she was an exchange student from Venezuela, in which a friend of my sister had introduced me to her. She was getting a business degree, and Stephanie was just a friend that I always cared about, but nonetheless, just a friend. And I always valued her friendship. See, I always thought you had to have money to get the girl. You had to have something to offer. Stephanie was the most popular in school, hung around all the cool people, and never met a stranger. I was a young boy who had an alcoholic brother, mom on Social Security, an old beater 1974 Ford Courier, and later a 1984 Toyota Camry LE, which I had to pay $200 a month for. I worked at Service Merchandise. I worked for U.S. Tobacco Company part-time, went to community college, and trained in karate from David Carr. I really didn't know why I wanted Stephanie, and I always feared losing her as a friend, so I would be better the way things were. I accepted the way things were going to be. We were better as friends. I remember meeting her just before I went into the military, and we went in and had some beers together, and I remember her telling me, Barney, I would date you, but you're leaving in the Air Force. I remember Liliana telling me not to look back. She had asked to marry her, and because I did not have anything to offer, I declined. On March 1994, I was put on a bus to go to San Antonio, Texas for basic training in the Air Force. I never saw Stephanie or Liliana again. Liliana and Stephanie had told me goodbye once again. I went to Jackson a few days later and was put on a bus for San Antonio, Texas. It was a very long ride, but I made it okay. When we got to the base, we were drilled by drill sergeants that got something to eat. I later learned that they watched the movie Full Metal Jacket before we got there. I was in the Air Force. This was basic training. I had went into the military because I had been gone to Meridian Community College and I had lost my grant, so I was paying for it as well. I was working at Service Merchandise part-time and U.S. Tobacco Company part-time and still taking karate with Dave Carr I loved about. I owed about $800 and the two women I cared for were gone. I figured I'd make the best of it. After all, I was in the Air Force. The most prestigious branch of service, at least when I get back, I would have something to offer Liliana, and maybe we would still get married. Although she was older, we never had sexual relations. I cared for her deeply, so at least I had that to believe. It or not, she never wrote to me. I had dated this girl for over 2 years. Her out of town to find clothes and shoes that she could find in Meridian, Mississippi, and I think I got one kiss, just hoping we were boyfriend and girlfriend. Now I realize all she was a user, and I was her peasant or pawn. I, at the time, was settled into basic training. I still hated the bugle in the morning. Having no hair was no fun either. I still had dreams. I also thought I was a Christian, and the Creator was going to take care of me. Well, in the Air Force, we had a lot of going on. The men